You know, when it comes to the world of coaching, there's a lot of choices. We have people ask the question all the time about what is coaching? What is it that we do? What is it that makes us different? What is it that sets us apart? And so Gary and I put our heads together. Two heads made one in this case. But we had to put our heads together and try to figure out, how do we explain what we do for people in a way that they can understand and make that connection of what coaching really is. And one of the ways that we came up was using the Iceberg. And so would you like to explain a little bit about why we chose the Iceberg and what that represents for our company?
Well, here's a thing that's very interesting, Ray. So originally, when we started working with companies, one of our philosophies were that you cannot improve that in which you don't measure. So our early logo was just a bar graph. And it kind of made sense from that perspective. But as we started to measure things, what we also discovered was that some of the things we measure are not the big difference maker. And the bigger thing are the hidden things. And it was really your idea, and I love it, with the iceberg, because 20% of the iceberg is exposed above the waterline. That is a lot of the systems and processes and things we measure. And those measurements often tell us, though, what's going on below the waterline, which is the 80%. But it's typically what happens in that 80% that affects everything above. So it's a bit unique in the fact that we have to measure the 20% to see how the progress is going in the 80%, but depending on the shift in the 80%, it changes the progress in the 20%.
Right. And so we're not telling businesses that you shouldn't care about the 20% above the waterline, because if you don't care about that, you don't really have a business.
Right.
You just have probably an expensive hobby.
Right.
So you have to have those things. We're not trying to tell anybody, hey, you don't need the stuff above the waterline. What we're saying is that we can help you with the stuff above the waterline.
Right.
But if you really want to make a difference, if you really want your business to grow, if you really want to be able to scale it at some point in time, you're going to have to shift that focus to the 80%. And that's kind of where we came up with the tagline that we have now for mindful business coaching.
Right.
So when we talk about mindful business coaching, we're talking about the stuff below the waterline.
Right.
And so what do you talk about with people? Like, how would you explain the below the waterline stuff? What is that?
Well, the below the waterline things that we get into don't just affect your business. It affects your relationships, your families, maybe how you interact in the community. But the first thing that comes to my mind is how you think. We talk about the mindful business coaching. It's really being mindful of your thoughts, your worldview, trying to understand it. Is it skewed or is it accurate? Clearly, we're human. It's always skewed. So as we start to work on bringing attention to our thoughts, maybe even our patterns, for myself, it was thought processes. That was the game changer for me. And we talk a lot about energy, how people carry energy. In those thought processes, what would happen is I would believe, and it's really a negative pattern, but I believed I had to always protect myself and people had to earn their trust. So instead of seeing them in their best light, I seen them in their worst light, which took my energy down. And all of a sudden, I was focusing on all the negative things with everyone. Well, what results do you expect from that?
Right. So really, the below the waterline stuff is how are you developing yourself?
Right.
How are you developing your people?
Right.
So that could be leadership, that could be personal growth and development.
Absolutely.
So really, the focus is on the people.
Right.
As opposed to the process, which is above the waterline.
We often hear people talk about they can't grow a business beyond a certain point. They've got something that's stopping them. And what we've consistently seen is that if they get on a personal growth journey and work on those 80% below the waterline, it'll elevate their business. And often then we'll see another plateau. They've possibly became comfortable because of the newfound growth and the changes in their life, and it's time for yet another change. I would believe, and I think you would endorse this, I would want your feedback on this. None of us are particularly have any different ability than others. Certainly IQs and things can vary and physical abilities can vary, but I don't believe any of us are tapped out on our potential.
Oh, absolutely not.
So if we're not tapped out on our potential and we look, to the business or the person or the athlete next to us performing at such a higher level than we are, it doesn't mean they always have a gift that we don't have. It may just mean they're really working and disciplined on trying to maximize their potential.
Right. Now, and we can actually point to some examples
Yes.
of people that we work with of how when we're really on a deep level only working on the below the waterline stuff, and they start to see growth that they didn't imagine could happen above the waterline, and all we're focusing on is the below the waterline stuff.
So let me ask you, Ray. It leads me to a client that you worked with recently. And most times when we come in and work with a company, we'll work on above the waterline things first because there may be some things happening in their business that's the most urgent. So that sometimes is necessary. You had an experience recently where they had you come in and take them through a leadership development program, which was all below the waterline. Share a little bit about that experience and how that changed things for them and what the results were that we could measure above the waterline.
Right. And so this business actually has their systems and processes dialed in pretty well. So they didn't really need so much help in that, but they really needed some help on the leadership development stuff. So they're taking our leadership development course, and they're about 10 months into a 12-month process with that, and shared with me that they never expected that the investment that they were making in that leadership course, which, by the way, they said, hey, we had sticker shock when you told us what it was going to be. Said, but now looking back on it, we are actually on about 125% growth trajectory year over year, this year from last year. And he said the only thing we can point to that we're doing any different is that leadership course. And he said, if you could have told me 10 months ago, if you write me a check for X, you'll get Y, I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Right.
So that's a perfect example of how that works.
And the human mind in that case, he was viewing it like if I buy a new piece of equipment, a new excavator, some type of equipment, and it's going to make X amount of money, and you can show it with the calculations in that 20%, no doubt he would do it.
Right. Absolutely.
What he did not calculate for was what that 80% will do.
Right. Now,
and they're not finished.
Oh no, they're not finished.
They're ready
excited.
to dig deeper
oh, yeah,
now.
They're ready to go deep. They're like, now they see what really can happen
right.
once you start getting in below the waterline and digging.
Right.
And actually we're also working with another client, and you're primary on that client, and they had some challenges that they needed to overcome because they had pretty much had their systems and processes figured out too, but they were struggling with some alignment
right.
in their leadership team.
Right.
So talk a little bit about what that experience has been like for them.
Well, that was so interesting because that company, actually, we had one of their employees make the initial contact, and they seen the value that if they can get leadership to align and get their goals aligned, how much further they could take it, how many more people they could serve. And so that's how we even began, because they had enough systems and processes in place that the employees thought so highly of it, they wanted to see the potential grow. And so when we came in, we actually both worked with them because there were multiple partners in that scenario. And we just took an open book, and from what you and I had discussed, who would work with who, and just trying to do some analysis with the limited data that we had. In my first meeting, it became very clear we need to totally mix that up. And it didn't take us very long, in probably about 6 months, for that to do a complete 180 and change, and the unity that's there. It doesn't mean they're best friends, but they understand the common goal, and they understand the value that each person brings to the table, and they do respect each other. And that's a huge difference. But before we were involved, they had the systems and the processes down, but they were not aligned on what they wanted to do, when to do it, how to do it. And when we unified that, the things that are happening there are amazing. It's absolutely amazing. If nothing improved from this point on, it's been worth their money. But I think you're going to see easily 100 to 200% growth in the next 12 and 24 months. It's getting ready to explode. I mean, it's starting to happen. And the amazing thing is, the only thing at this point that's changed that is measurable is alignment.
Right.
The only thing.
The only thing up to this point.
And production is picking up a lot. And when I say production, that means more orders are coming in. It's not that they're producing more and they couldn't keep up. It's like the trajectory of growth is already happening. Now, there's other steps in place that are going to take them way past yet, but that was just having the energy and the alignment come together.
Right. The energy level that comes after alignment is so much better.
Right.
And they're already experiencing that with their customers, with their vendors,
yes,
their employees. You know, there's just a different feeling in the building.
Right.
And positive energy attracts positive things.
Yes.
Negative energy repels. So, and that's why that below the waterline stuff is so important.
Absolutely.
You have to pay attention to the energy.
Right.
I would say most business owners would agree with this. If you had to choose an A-plus process and a C employee, or an A-plus employee and a C process, you're going to take the A-plus employee and the C process every day of the week, because your A-plus employee is going to elevate your C process. Your C employee is going to destroy your A-plus process.
Absolutely.
So make sure you're paying as much attention as you should be to below the waterline. If 80% of your attention is not below the waterline, then you need to figure out how to shift that attention to below the waterline, because that'll drive the 20% that you can measure to heights you didn't imagine.
Can I share one more story?
You know what, Gary? I thought you were probably going to ask that, so why don't you go ahead and do that?
We've got another client we worked with, and he was a startup when we picked him up. And as the business grew, he started to hire the help he thought he could afford. And when we really started to mine in and measure some things and some of the metrics in the 20%, what he discovered was he had the business he dreamt of, but he wasn't making money. And if it was only going to be a hobby, he didn't want it. So he knew that there were other businesses out there that he could go be successful at. So why invest his life into this if it wasn't going to reward him and his family? We made a bold move. Some of it he didn't really try to make happen. And in some cases, he had to make steps to replace it. But he cleaned house on all of his employees, hired back those A-plus employees, and in literally a matter of a month or two, totally transformed his business. The negativity's gone. He didn't tolerate it. He was working on the 80%. He wasn't going to tolerate it. He had done what he could to try to help these people in their 80%. Some of them didn't want change, so he made a change. And now he's got A-plus employees, profitability's up. He has less employees than he had. So he's got less headaches, and he's producing more work And it's just been a wonderful experience, but it's because this young man has focused entirely on the 80%. There's been some 20% things in there, and we do touch on those, but it's always in the 80% where he's at. And again, 5 years from now will be amazing with things he's got coming.
Excellent. So is there anything else that you would like people to know or understand about what's different? I think we did a pretty good job of explaining what we mean by the iceberg, what we mean by mindful business coaching, gave some real life examples of what's working. Is there anything else you think we need to add, or is it just, hey, give us a call? We'd be happy to have a conversation with you about what you would need to do for your business and how we might be able to help you.
That's a great question, Ray. There is something I'd like to add. The one thing that I see often, and we come in behind other consulting companies quite often. It seems, in fact, sometimes people are cautious in even working with us because they've had an experience that was less than successful.
Right.
One thing that we try to do is we try to tailor the processes and the support to that company according to the culture and the personality of that company. There, in my belief, and I'm going to throw a word out there and I'll let you then respond to that word, but cookie cutter does not work in today's world. Because if you like cookie cutter, go buy a McDonald's franchise.
Right.
That's a cookie cutter.
So is a baker.
And a baker. There's another one. But having said...
Because they actually cut cookies.
They do cut cookies. But having said that, each company, because of the makeup of the employees and the owner, have a unique culture, personality, if you will. And so we don't just try to put people in a box and have meetings to have meetings, have titles to have titles. You're not going to probably call one contractor and then go into the next contractor and have the same even positions. Even though they do the same work, there could be a complete different structure because of culture, because of abilities. Sometimes if personnel changes, then you have to mix some things up. But the big thing that we want to focus on at Gage Bontrager Consulting is effective. Not is it, when we measure, is it effective or is it not effective? That's the big measurement tool. So we don't like to have meetings just to have meetings.
No,
we want to be
not.
effective and efficient, and those are the things that we look at. I know there's a lot of companies out there, and I would not, sometimes it might be the person that they're working with. It's not necessarily the systems, but that 80% is hugely important.
Excellent. Well, if you have any questions about that, we would be happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. Come look us up at GageBontragerConsulting.com. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, about anywhere you want to find us, Instagram.
Probably start with the website.
That would be the best.
That would
There's
probably
a
be the best.
members channel, a lot of free content out there, and you'll learn a lot about us and our philosophies and see some testimonials.